So ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to introduce Ben Maynard.
Thank you very much, David. And well read. I didn't write my biography so it's easy to read. It turns out there's I need to read that. Well, you did great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, everyone, for coming along and listening to me today. It's been a while since I've done something like this, so I'm hoping I'm not going to be too rusty, and that you can hear me loud and clear. I'm going to be sipping some water as we go. It's been a long day of talking. It's lovely to see some people I know here, and also some people that I don't know, and hopefully we'll get to know over this chat. We're having a Q&A at the end. So let's begin, and we're going to talk about this topic, which is rather like quite an inflammatory title. How does product ownership kill agile at scale? And this is a talk that I put together over the years. I suppose I had a seed of a thought for this, because I had worked in many large organizations, and what I'd found was as a fan of large scale Scrum, obviously my thoughts and feelings towards product ownership are somewhat biased towards those. And when I was working in large organisations, places like Royal Bank of Scotland or Deutsche Bank, or many of the companies I've helped out over the last couple of years, I was seeing this common pattern that the approach that they were taking to product ownership was, kill is a strong word, but it was severely hindering any opportunities they had to achieve anything like the benefits they thought they were going to achieve by trying to be agile at scale, and particularly in people's desire to migrate to feature teams. So this talk is to explain how product ownership stops agile at scale being successful, and I'm going to give you some tips as to how you can kind of circumvent some of the problems. And then hopefully we get through and I don't waffle on too much, and we can actually have a decent Q&A at the end. So first of all, this is me and some data. So I looked at I thought to myself, I see a lot of presentations and people give up all these lovely numbers and stats and graphs. I thought, I'll look at the State of Agile survey and I'll get some really interesting data around product ownership from there. And I'm not sure if I succeeded, because I was kind of astounded at how few people responded to the survey back in 2019. And maybe I was looking in the wrong area. But what was quite surprising was that 6% of the responders were product owners and managers, which I found was what I would say is actually a reasonably large percentage. Because I don't think, in my mind, that a lot of those people maybe are product owners or product managers, as has been intended. But what was very clear was that people chose Agile, and I think people have always chosen Agile predominantly for reasons around speed, for reasons around engagement, and because it's attractive and consultancies do a good job at selling it. But everyone was experiencing the same problems. Number one, there wasn't alignment between the business and IT. Okay, people struggle to get the business on board, to get the customers, to get people fully engaged from the business side to really kind of untap a lot of the potential that comes with Agile. And yet, even though half the organizations say they're using Scrum. So I was wondering, it reminded me of many situations I had where people had decided to use Scrum, decided to get a product owner, thought it should be in the business, but weren't able to really engage the business. So it ended up becoming a technical product owner. And then over time, those technical product owners, what I saw was that people just kind of gave up. And so instead of actually saying, well, let's really view the product as a big holistic thing, and let's go to minimize our product ownership and our members of product owners, actually people really heavily gravitated towards SAFe and ended up having product owners per teams, which is kind of the problem. So what we're going to cover. Number one, we're going to cover the problems, right? The problems that emerge when product ownership is done, in my mind, in a suboptimal way, if your goal is true adaptability. So we'll cover all of those. We'll then hone in on the product owner as a team player and not a boss. What does it really mean, right, when the product owner is the boss, and what problems does that bring? We'll also take a little bit of a route around looking at dependencies. Like, dependencies are the scourge of an organization, and product ownership should and could fix that, but people just don't see the opportunities often. And finally, we'll look at relationships and how, for me, the very essence of product ownership is about the relationships. And for the record, I suppose my history, my first foray into Scrum and Agile 8 or 9 years ago, I played the role of a fake product owner. I had a business owner who didn't want to take ownership of prioritizing the backlog and doing the work of a product owner. So I took it on myself, and I learned a whole heap about how not to do product ownership. But what I did learn was actually a lot of it boils down to the relationships. So let's set the scene somewhat. So organizations tend to increase in size if they are successful. And when you increase in size, I would say there's a high probability that you're going to also increase the number of problems that you come across. And when you take into account that, in my opinion, the role of product owner is something that's incredibly valuable and should be rewarding for the individuals and the organizations alike, then what we should see is the role of product owner helping to resolve some of the problems, really being on the front foot of these things. However, when the role isn't executed properly or isn't supported adequately, then what it can do is kill dreams of making Agile a success. So what are these problems? Number one, coordination. Too many products with too many product backlogs creates a coordination overhead. Right? Coordination is a wasteful activity, and we would want to avoid it if we could do at all. And it's also very distracting. So what we end up with is a certain amount of organizational waste, and certain amount of time and effort being taken up in coordination. And generally speaking, from a technical perspective, with all of these different backlogs and with many, many different product owners all trying to deliver one thing, what we end up with is a huge degree of delayed integration. Okay? And these are problems for organizations. What we find when we have a proliferation of product owners, particularly team-level product ownership, is that often we lose our ability to learn more holistically about what we're trying to do. And when I say we, what I mean about here really is often the team members. Team members aren't given the opportunity to learn about the holistic product. What they're given the opportunity to learn is maybe about the technical components or the very narrow features that they have on their thin slice of the backlog. And because the teams don't learn, we can't adapt very quickly, which means that we reduce our flexibility. If we have lots of different product backlogs and we have many items on these kind of thin product backlogs and they're all per team, we end up working on low value items because we often fail to frequently reprioritize relatively all of the items from each of those individual backlogs. And what we need to really be working on and have confidence that we're working upon the highest value items is a way of frequently, and I would say almost near constantly, reevaluating the relative priority of the items that we are faced with. What we also find is alienation. When the product owner isn't a servant leader, doesn't act as a team player, then the product owner can alienate themselves from the teams. And that distance that's created creates a distance in knowledge and understanding and creates huge problems for the team when they actually need support and assistance from the product owner. Even worse, and we'll talk about this later, when they become the boss. One thing I find very interesting, and it's not spoken about enough, is that the role of a product owner, regardless if they're a team level product owner or a more broader product level product owner, whatever they are doing should be supporting the organizational goal. If the organizational goal is increased market share, it's increased customer satisfaction, employee engagement, fantastic, right? Those kind of things from a product ownership perspective, perhaps we can kind of see how that would work. But if the organizational goal is also to embrace agility, then the product owner also has to accept there's certain behaviors that they will have to be exhibiting in order to really achieve that holistic organizational goal. All too often, product owners are elevated up to a lofty position, perhaps, or they are alienated from the team, and they decide that they can behave in whatever way they like. And this is a problem, and one of our goals is increased adaptability through using agility. The Dunning-Kruger effect is a big problem. I definitely am guilty of this quite a lot of the time. And I think one of the key things to take away from this is that when product owners don't realize that they also need to learn, this causes a problem, and it means that we have problems when we're working at scale. And finally, the final problem I want to mention here is trust. Right, trust is a magic ingredient, right, to an organization. And when we have trust, we can be fast. When we have trust, we are able to trust that the teams will be doing a good job. I think of really successful product ownership when the product owner when the product owner is looking after numerous teams, and a lot of those teams are reordering the backlog in close collaboration with the customer on a daily basis. The product owner doesn't have to be involved in that micro level reprioritization because they trust the team. When there is no trust or low trust, you become slow. Because if you take that example, the product owner has to be involved in all the conversations, gets involved in all the nitty gritty. And if you are looking after multiple teams, you can't be involved in all that low level reordering of the backlog every day. And it will distract you away from other tasks and lead to much more narrow product ownership and many more product owners. So there are lots of problems that I see are all related to product ownership. And these are problems which I believe can be solved. So, one note on this, I suppose. I've seen many a situation where product owners have been managers of other product owners, and I don't feel that this has really been that helpful. Okay, so everything that I'm going to be sharing with you is based upon a product owner being a leader, and it is based upon the intent of the Scrum Guide. And when you look at the breadth of the role of product owner, particularly in large-scale Scrum or less, it doesn't provide much room for the management of people because this is a really tough job. It does, however, provide plenty of opportunities for leadership. So let's look at that. What does it mean to be the boss? With product owner as a team player and not a boss. So when you're getting bigger and you end up with a team of product owners, it's completely understandable that maybe one product owner is seen as a higher in a hierarchy, if you still have a hierarchy, or more equal than others. And so when you've got these increasing people, then it becomes a difficult conundrum. Who is the manager of the product owners, and does the product owner become the boss? And the problem that I found with this is, one, it causes extra heartache by way of conflict for the product owner. There are tough decisions that you have to make as a product owner. And let's say, for example, that you, I'll cover all these probably in one fell swoop. But if you have a number of product owners that report into you, and you have set expectations that they will get a promotion, or they're going to, if they deliver this thing, then they're going to do, then you're going to make sure they're looked after, or they've got what they feel is a career-defining delivery, or it's particularly challenging, and they want to rise to the occasion to prove themselves, so one day they can reach the lofty heights of a chief product owner or something else, or maybe it's just about bonus. Maybe they've just been promised some more money. The problem is that if you're then the product owner and you're looking at the person that reports into you, the person that you're managing, and you're seeing the work they're doing actually right now is nowhere near as valuable as it was a month ago. And that actually, if you were really strictly basing your value decisions based upon relative priority, the thing they're working on will be stopped. But you've kind of had conversations with them about their bonus and about their career. This makes it much more difficult to make the hard product decisions that you have to make those difficult investment decisions about where you steer your funding based upon, relatively speaking, what is the most valuable thing. Now, I'm not saying that these types of challenges don't exist if you're not a boss or a product owner, but as a product owner, what I have seen is that when you are the boss, these expectations, particularly if an organization that's on a journey and they still have annual performance reviews, these expectations are real. And as a consequence of these expectations around bonuses and pay rises and promotions, as well as all the other distractions that come about from being a manager in a large organization, it just doesn't leave enough room to do a fantastic job of being a product owner without then hiring more people around you. So the recommendation is experiment with having product owners that don't manage other people. Figure out a different way to deal with their line management and let them focus and let them be free of a lot of the kind of emotional things that come with managing people, so they can focus on making the right product decisions. And a fantastic way of going about doing this, of course, is to be a servant leader. And I've always believed that product ownership should be a constant act of servant leadership to grow those around them. And that's perfectly possible and almost easier, I would say, if you have no management responsibility for them. Okay, number 3, product breadth. Now, this is an interesting one. Now, when I say product breadth, what I'm talking about here is the number of technical components or other components that are included within your product. So if we take the really simple example, we have a simple application with a database, something in the middle, some services, and then a front end. Okay, what we're saying here is that we're in this really simple product, we've got 3 components: front end, middle, and back. Now, if the customer only derives value from all of those 3 things working together, then those 3 components are the product. And when I say breadth, what I'm talking about is that's a nice broad product if it delivers value to the customer. If you think your product is just the front end, or if you think your product is just the middle, or the the database, your products are too narrowly defined, because no one of those things will consistently deliver value, deliver something which a customer is willing to pay for. So the breadth of our product is incredibly important. So when we're looking at product ownership, a product owner should be able to define the breadth of their product, or at least be able to go to war for it. So when we view our products too narrowly, we create dependencies. We don't want dependencies between these 3 components. We want to eradicate them. And by having a broad product, we remove those individual silos of components, and maybe the product owners that looked after those individual silos, and we keep those people because they're probably fantastic, and we find them a really valuable role to do. And we bring those 3 components together, we eradicate those dependencies, and then we make a nice broad product. So we save time and we save money, and we push the dependencies down to a lower level. Unless you do that, unless you have a broad enough product definition, so you're delivering features as a whole, which the customer's willing to pay for, feature teams are not possible. Right? Feature teams are teams which have no dependencies upon any other team or any other backlog in order to deliver the end-to-end customer feature. So if we don't define our product broadly enough, feature teams are just a dream. What also happens when we have 3 separate components and narrow product backlogs is that we can get a lot of duplication. I lost count of a number of times, and we've brought people together into feature teams or near feature teams for the first time, and we've got people who have been working historically on different components who are noticing that they've been trying to solve the same problem for a few years, or that one area solved a problem many years ago and the other area just hasn't been able to do it. And what I find with a lot of the feature teams is that the amount of duplication that's removed, that a lot of the optimization, architecturally speaking, that happens in those early days is phenomenal. And this is just because they've been working in silos for so long, duplicating work. So broad product definitions allow us to remove a lot of the waste of duplication as well. And finally, and very importantly, only when we have a broad product, when we're actually working on whole features, which maybe encompass all 3 of those different components, can we actually relatively prioritize things that are valuable from the customer's perspective. If we have narrow product backlogs, which just have certain features or certain technical components on there and tasks, then actually our ability to prioritize from the customer perspective is incredibly limited, unless we create a structure around them to bring it all up and various long cycles to try and make sure we're working on the same thing. But in actual fact, a broad product definition with a single product owner over the top of it simplifies that. Not saying it's easy to achieve, but I'm saying it's incredibly effective and does enable feature teams, does enable the eradication of dependencies and thus saving a lot of time and effort, and does enable real prioritization from the customer's perspective, simply and easily and on demand. And finally, relationships. So when you're a small company and there's just 8 people, like you know everyone, right? Relationships are really easy. And now there are 800, like things get very different. Like things aren't as easy as they were. So it's integral if a product owner is to order the backlog based upon what they believe to be the correct value here, or the correct ordering. I believe that a product owner ultimately prioritizes the backlog based upon their opinion rather than any hard or fast value calculation, because there are some things that we just cannot calculate. So in order to get a holistic opinion, something which makes sense, there are a number of core categories of relationships that I recommend a product owner focus upon. And excuse me whilst I just look over here, because I was wondering if I could find something, because I mentioned number of people. And what this then leads some people to then talk about is Dunbars number. Okay, so I'll talk about that in a second. Now, these are the 5 relationships I recommend. There are others, don't get me wrong, but these are the 5 what I felt were probably the most important when I made this slide, and plus there were 5 different options on the slide template. So first and foremost, hire management. The product needs to stay funded, and the organization needs to be keeping to head in the right direction. So cultivating, growing, and nurturing strong relationships with higher management, listening to them, doing your best to serve them, educate them when needed, help them to make some of the hard decisions, make sure that you as a product owner is following the right direction. Those relationships are key. Secondly, it's really important for a product owner to have a strong relationship with a Scrum Master. You can replace that with Agile coach if you like, but it's hugely important. Being a product owner is not an easy job, and you have to be humble and you have to be open to coaching and support. So the role of a Scrum Master or an Agile coach is there to help maximize return on investment and to essentially help the product owner achieve the organizational goals and the product goals via Scrum. So for the product owner and the Scrum Master to have a strong, meaningful relationship is very important. Now, part of the problem then becomes that often we recruit very, and if you have a remnants of an organizational hierarchy, Scrum Masters maybe come in lower down the hierarchy than the product owners at the top. And so then there is a power differential, and it's very hard for the product owner to look down the organization and say, this person's going to help me, which is why flat structures are always preferable, but I think often a dream. And secondly, why it's really important that I would say that you're, as much as possible, the Scrum Master is seen as a very senior role to help eradicate some of that power differential. I would say that I was probably at my most effective as a product owner, or as a Scrum Master, sorry, when I was a director of an organization. Thirdly, the product owner has to build and nurture strong relationships between the users and the customers. They have to serve their needs. They've got to keep revenue flowing. The ultimate arbiters of success or failure are, of course, the people using and paying for our product. So understanding them and having a strong relationship with them, building that loyalty is immensely important. Unsurprisingly, it's important for the product owner to have a strong relationship with the teams, right? To help build that trust and to help build empathy for them and with them. That's hugely important. If you remember, that lack of trust will make us go slow. If we can build trust, it helps us speed up. And empathy is key. We have to understand each other and sometimes stand face to face and appreciate what the other person is going through. And lastly on here, the most important, one of the biggest take-homes, if you could take anything away from this, is the product owner has to build relationships between teams and users. Right. The Agile Manifesto, love it or hate it, laid out a number of principles. And one of those principles says something along the lines of business people and developers should work together on a daily basis. Nothing changed in Scrum. Scrum wasn't designed to put a role in between the business people and developers. And this is one thing I often find quite astounding, is that it's people almost look at Scrum and think, oh, well, it's okay to have a product owner at a team level who talks to the users and puts stuff on the backlog and helps the team understand the stuff that the users have said to them. Why would they have designed Scrum originally to kind of just flagrantly ignored one of the Agile principles when they tried so hard to stick to the rest? Scrum wasn't initially designed to do that. Other frameworks that have come since have seemingly been designed to really promote this handoff and to promote this in-between person between the teams and the users. But if you really want to tap into the good stuff, if you really want to have increased adaptability, if you as a product owner want to get some of the work off your back and let the teams do some of the work that they are probably more than capable of doing, and then as a product owner, building the relationships between the teams and the users is massively important. Now, the one thing I will say is that with my comment earlier, with 800 people, things are very different. Dunbar's number is something which is often cited and people talk about, but it's been incorrectly applied for many years. Dunbar's number doesn't say that you should build an organization around the 100 to 150 people. What Robin Dunbar said was that you can build social connections with 100 to 150 people. Those social connections are in your personal life and your work life. So if you have 100 friends outside of the office, you actually haven't got that much capacity to take in that many more when you get into the office. So what I always prefer to do is just accept that and say that if you really want to have those meaningful relationships with people, then actually design the sections of your organization at a much smaller level. Okay, and this really helps with the relationship building. So, the tips. First of all, I banged on about it. Define broadly, eradicate dependencies, eradicate roles, change your structure, and create a product and customer-centric organization. As a product owner, focus on servant leadership. Serve first and make the conscious decision to lead second, right? So that those that depend on you and around you can grow and be successful. And focus on the 5 relationships. Create and nurture them. Help use those relationships to help eradicate waste. Focused on being effective and focus on building trust. So that's it. I'm almost at time. I want to say thank you very much for listening to me for the last 25 minutes or so. This link is my website, sheave.co.uk. Visit our site. If you want to book a conversation with us, please do. It's very easy to do. Just click on contact us and you get a little calendar pop up. And if you want to come along to one of my courses because you'd like to hear more, then please do. I think there's a discount code there, which maybe you can find other places as well. I'd love to see you on some of my courses. I've got my an in-person course in August, and it'd be great to see some real people. Virtual people are great, but real people apparently are better. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Ben. I think if we had a room full of real and not virtual people, you'd be getting a big round of applause now. So thank you very much for an excellent and thought-provoking topic as well. So really appreciate your time this evening. So folks, we're just going to we have a few minutes for Q&A. So if I could invite everyone to add any questions they have into the Q&A panel of the platform, please. So I see one there already from Madhav. So thank you, Madhav. So Madhav's question is, what do you mean by defining it broadly enough?
So if in my ideal product backlog, and let me stop sharing my screen because that's just my ideal product backlog is one which has customer features that a team can take and own end to end. So they are not dependent upon someone to do some work in a database, or someone to do some documentation, or somebody to do some performance testing or some security testing. I want that team, as much as possible, maybe not straight away, but over time, to own it all. So what I would say by defining it broadly enough is that if your backlog doesn't contain features that a team can work on as a whole, if your backlog means that they take features and they are dependent upon somebody else, then what that's telling me is that perhaps that other backlog, wherever that other team are working, there's an opportunity there to bring that into your backlog, and so you have a broader definition. It contains more of the components needed to deliver value to the customer. I know it's a difficult one to get your head around, and I can't think of a different language for it off the top of my head. So, Madhav, I hope that's helped answer the question. If it's not, feel free to reach out to me, and we can spend some time going through it.
That's great. Thank you, Ben, and thank you for the question, Madhav, as well. Just another from Peter McCann. So when you speak of feature teams, how do you manage the size that the teams could grow to, particularly if there's large dependencies on specific aspects, for example, account services supporting platforms?
Yeah, and I find it's a great question, Peter. So thank you for asking it. And it's what I find is that this is often the case in large organizations that have been working in a more traditional manner for some time, because feature teams actually require a reasonably kind of adaptive organizational structure and adaptive software architecture if indeed you are working in software. And so that actually when you think of kind of using feature teams or kind of to achieve a certain goal, it takes time, and actually for some may never truly be possible. Which I find is it's a sad fact. But there was a talk I did a little while ago with a guy called Jeff Cowhig called Dreams of Feature Teams, And we go into this in great depth, because there are some organizations, for very good reasons, that won't be able to find a way to bring in the account services supporting platforms into a feature team. And that's something that they have to manage. And I think this is one why the way that I've always chose to approach it, and the way that Les recommends is say, well, you eradicate all the dependencies you can at the beginning, right? And you start and you practice and you get better. And when you see that opportunity to remove another dependency, if that's going to help you optimize what you want to achieve, then you find a way to do it. And if you can't, then you just say, okay, we can't do that one right now. Let's focus on the way that we can. You know, there are always obstacles. I think John Smart said to me years ago, you know, about a book, you know, the obstacles are the path. Sometimes you can remove them, sometimes you have to sidestep them. So it is a challenge, but Peter, it's about being sensible about it, understanding what's feasible, and that the journey to feature teams is a long one.
That's great. Thank you, Peter, for the question. I think very topical subject on feature teams. Ben, just maybe one more from myself, if that's okay. So you called out some really important points there around building relationships, and I really liked that one around building relationships between teams and users. So for a product owner who's maybe used to working with one team at the moment, what does their day-to-day look like when that's not the case? So when they're kind of working in more of that feature team setup, you know, maybe how's the team behaving differently, maybe interacting with users? What does that look like on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, in my opinion, if it's working well, one, I feel like I need to caveat a little bit and say, you know, I'm not saying make how many trainers have you done before being comfortable being an agile coach? That's a good question. I would say that if the team are comfortable with that person and want them around, then they should stay around, you know, and the skills and the knowledge and the information that they hold is incredibly valuable. And so they should stick around. The role that they play, it may need to be a bit more facilitative, perhaps. But I've known many great people who have played the role of I suppose what some may call a product owner, but I've kind of, in my experience, they've just been really solid analysts. People with great analysis skills, great people skills, great facilitation skills, huge levels of empathy that the team really want to be around. The only time I see it becomes a real different. I mean, there was one situation where, you know, when the person who wanted to kind of take up a team product owner role, like asked if they could do it, and then the answer was, well, we don't have team level product owners. And then this person left, and the team were like, do you know what? Actually, like, we don't actually mind too much, because we want to talk to the users. We don't want to get involved. So my eye has been caught by that question by Anonymous.
Yeah. If that's okay, if you got a little bit more time. So I think the question was, how many train wrecks have you had before you felt comfortable being an agile coach, Ben?
Well, that's it. I don't know. I mean, that's made under the presumption that I feel comfortable being an agile coach. I don't feel comfortable being an agile coach. I feel, because I think being an agile coach is a very broad thing, right? And I think there's a lot of pressure put on agile coaches. So no, I don't know. I mean, I don't feel comfortable. I've had many train wrecks. I would say that I've probably had more failures than successes. And I'm fine with that. But what matters for me is that, you know, what makes me feel comfortable with being me, I suppose, is that there are a handful of people, I don't know, 20 or 30 that I've met over the years whose lives are better and happier than they were before our paths crossed. And I'm still in touch with them, and they mean the world to me, and I think I mean something to them too. So like I'm happy with that. And if people keep wanting to listen to me and take my advice and help me avoid any future train wrecks, then fantastic. But I wouldn't say I feel comfortable as an agile coach, but I do feel that I feel comfortable being me, and that's been a long journey.
Cool. Well, thank you for sharing that. So Ben, I think we could take questions all evening, but we're just conscious of your time. First of all, thank you so much again for the talk, and really enjoyed it. You mentioned some courses. Where can people find out about upcoming courses that you're running?
Well, if you head to the Wonderful Skills Matters on their website, you can find them there. I'm not sure if there is a link perhaps in the chat that we can put in there. Let me see if I can bring that up. But all of my courses are on the Skills Matters website, which I'm popping into the chat now. So go on there. So I've got a number of courses. The 1 day less basics. There's a 5-module less provisional less practitioner, and then there's the in-person less practitioner, which I'm running for the first time in person for a number of years. Well, I say number, it feels like a number of years. At the end of August in London, so it'd be lovely to see to meet some new people there and maybe meet some old faces as well.
That's awesome. I was really excited. I think when I was talking to you yesterday, your first in-person workshop now, I think that's great news. So yeah, definitely recommend. Like I say, I joined one of Ben's less courses last year in Workday where I work, and it was fantastic. So I couldn't recommend Ben's workshops highly enough. Okay, so Ben, we'll let you go. Thanks so much again.